Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, John Gambadoro of Arizona Sports reporting that the Suns are in fact expected to make a selection in the first round of next week's NBA draft after all. So let's discuss where they might look, where they might not look, and what it tells us about their plans this summer. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Brendon Kleen, your host. Welcome to the show. I'm a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons and the host of the Just Basketball Show. Thank you for kicking off your Wednesday with the show, with Locked On Suns, making us your first listen to kick off your day. We are free and available everywhere, including YouTube, so if you haven't already, hit follow, hit subscribe, get us in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Keep track of all the noise, all the rumors, all the reports right here. Become an everydayer. Get locked onto the Suns all off season long. Again, just hit that button. You get an episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Let's dive right in. Today's episode is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right. Burns and Gambo on Monday afternoon. John Gambadoro reports that the Suns are not expected to trade their pick in next week's draft for an established veteran player. That is the bottom line of what he said. We will get to the Tyler Kolek rumors and what Gambo said there and my thoughts on that. We will talk about Bronny James and if that noise is still real or not, as well as some examples of trading back, which is also something Gambo left open. So this is by no means 9 days out from the draft. Here is what the Suns will do. But I think we can at least say that their plans as of right now, Tuesday, June 18th at 3:30 p.m. as I'm recording this, do not currently seem to include getting rid of the pick to trade for a Landry Shamet type like they did, of course, in 2021. So, this comes back to something I've been saying all offseason, since the moment the Suns got eliminated and we all trained our eyes toward the summer. Being all in doesn't have to mean being overly aggressive. Okay? The right move is not always the move that gives up the most assets. There is a reason that when I did my best case scenario offseason, if you all remember, and that episode did pretty well. I'm assuming a lot of you who are listening to this or watching this, you probably checked that one out. If not, go back, find it, listen to it. I told you then that my preferred pathway with all of this, and I don't know the prospects. I don't scout the draft like I used to because the Suns haven't made a pick in 4 years. So this was not me saying, oh, if they can get such and such draft prospect, then I'll be excited. No, this was purely about a value judgment, getting the most bang for your buck, given the Suns have so few assets. They're heading into this draft, heading into this offseason with 2 first-round picks at their disposal, one of which is this year a pick they could make or trade, and basically Nasir Little and Yusuf Nurkic's contracts. That's it. So with that said, I proposed in that scenario this taking a player with this pick this year, trading the 2031 pick, and getting younger and deeper overall. That's kind of the gist of what I tried to do there, right? So in my imagination, it was trading that 2031 pick and Nurkic for Grant Williams, Trey Mann, and the 42nd pick this year, taking a player at 42, taking a player at 22, getting Grant Williams, getting Trey Mann, and then, I think I had a couple minimum signings in there, whatever, that's not what we're talking about. But that version of reality gets you a lot more cracks at it, at finding contributors. Whereas if, let's say you combine, the Suns cannot aggregate salary, so they can't trade Little and Nurkic together in one trade. So everything but that, basically. Both picks, and let's say Nurkic, because he makes more money, you can get a higher paid player. Let's say you go out and get, fill in with your favorite guy in that price range. The only one I'm thinking of right now is Grant Williams because he's, I think technically DeJounte Murray counts. Or he did. Or let's say Austin Reeves. He's not available, but let's use Austin Reeves. He makes the right amount of money for this. Austin Reeves is a much better player right now than anybody the Suns will get at 22. Almost for sure. Even Tyrese Maxey or Desmond Bane, these late bloomers, they're not great as rookies. Reeves is better. But is Reeves by himself a surefire lock to get you closer to winning a championship? And I know I'm focused on this one example of this player, but that's not the point. Put in whatever player you want. Maybe not. Maybe that's not enough, even though he's better, right? The Suns are in a position where what they need is more specialists, more depth, more positional and lineup versatility. So, going all in, putting everything together is not always the way to do it. So, we'll get to the ramifications and the specific players and all that, I promise, because that matters. It's not just the first move of, okay, we're taking a player or we're not taking a player or we're making this trade to get these picks or this player. It's okay, then what are you doing with that? But the mindset here, where again, being all in does not have to mean being overly aggressive. Taking a player here at 22 with one of the only opportunities you have to get young talent in the door, to me, that is still being all in. I know I've harped on these examples a ton. The finals are now over. This series is not ongoing to give us the example, but they're two teams that show it really well. The Mavericks tanked last year. They make the conference finals in 2022. You don't need me to remind you of that. Then last season, 2023, they get Kyrie, but they don't even make the play-in. They rest their guys because they're not even worried about chasing the 10 or the 9. They just say, screw it. They get Derek Lively. They make several moves after that, and they're right back to the finals. Boston, they trade a first for Brogdon. Then they use Brogdon in the Holiday deal. They get picks back in the Porzingis trade, and then they, again, turn around and go get Holiday. In the middle of that, Smart goes out the door. They sign and trade Grant Williams away from their team. Again, this is theoretically, they're coming off of a finals berth and then an Eastern Conference Game 7. They get rid of one of their key role players in the form of Grant Williams. They're a thinner team, but they stayed flexible. They got picks and Porzingis. They got picks for Grant Williams. Then here on the other side, they're going and getting Drew Holiday. That's what the best teams do. And I'm not even going to continue to harp on those examples because, frankly, I thought of a Suns example that's just as good as I was putting all of this together. 2019 draft. The Suns made two moves, both of which allowed them to acquire draft players and acquire veterans in one move. They trade up from 11 to 6. They trade back from 6 to 11. They get Dario Saric, and they end up drafting the same guy they wanted all along, which was Cam Johnson, who we've heard since they would have maybe taken at 6. They get the 25th pick in that draft and Aaron Baines for a future first, and they select Ty Jerome. The pick didn't work out, but Baines definitely worked out. Point is, that's the creative type of mindset that the best teams use to stay nimble, stay flexible, and give themselves consistent chances to improve. Taking the biggest swing possible every time you get the chance to get an at-bat is not always what's going to get you to the Hall of Fame, get you the batting average or the OBP or whatever that you need. It's about what makes the most sense now And I am honestly surprised, but nevertheless excited that the Suns are seeing this the same way that I have been seeing it, which is that drafting somebody next week is just as likely to pay off as taking that big swing. Let's talk about Tyler Kolek, Bronny James, and beyond as far as the Suns' options when they do make their pick or picks next week. Coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Whether that's a supercharger, a roof rack, an exhaust kit, LED headlight, I will add the flap on the interior of your vehicle from the ceiling down that blocks the sun out of your eyes, which is a must-have anywhere, but of course in Phoenix, and then a wheel cover. Literally have bought 2 of these things from eBay Motors because for some reason, I'm not going to throw my manufacturer under the bus, but they couldn't get their you-know-what together. eBay Motors had me covered, though, with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You, too, will also find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Keeping the show rolling, John Gambadoro in the same report on Monday's show said, yes, I can tell you the Suns like Tyler Kolek. That is a name that I think you have to keep in mind for the Phoenix Suns, but I do think people are overestimating how much the Suns like him. Meanwhile, Tuesday, Jonathan Givony of ESPN reported that the Suns have a second workout with Bronny James. Gambo reported about Bronny that he does not expect that the Suns would pick Bronny at 22, but the fact that they're bringing him in again and the fact that Gambo feels like 22 might be early for Kolek speaks to a potential trade. Okay, but let's just focus on these players for a moment, right? Because there is Day'Ron Holmes, there is Jalen Tyson, there's Jalen Bridges, there's Johnny Furphy, Filipowski, there's McCullough. There's any number of dudes who, if the Suns kept 22 but did not take Kolek, did not take Bronny, could still select. And again, I'm no draft expert. We will be having Zach Cohen of Real GM on the show soon in the lead up to next week's draft. Maybe bring Damon Allred back here as well to get a last digest and download on those players. Again, that's not the point I'm making here. But let's just take it for what it is, right? The Suns clearly, and this is James Jones heaven, having a draft where you're just treating it the way I broke down in the last segment of we are making a pick and almost treating it like free agency. Right? You know, of course, the draft board can break down a different way. Guys might not be available. It's not just pure negotiations. But for the Suns, it is purely about filling a need, filling a spot in their rotation. James Jones has talked forever about the 5x5 note card. I want to have 5 guys, I guess it's 3x5, not 5x5. He wants 3 guys at each position to get to a 15-man roster effectively. And so for him, this draft is about, let me get one of those 3 at one of those 5 and go from there. So, of course, the Suns need they feel that they need some kind of point guard option, right? And so Kolek provides that. He is a great playmaker. He is a great pick and roll distributor. He can play in the transition game. He can play in the half court game. He's big enough that it's not a huge weakness for him. He can shoot. He can shoot on the ball or off the ball. A lot of it works. We talked about it on Monday's episode. Makes perfect sense. They clearly feel like they need point-of-attack defense and kind of that hustle and athleticism and grit. And Bronny, in theory, could eventually be that. Now, the Bronny part of it adds up a little less, given that I'm doubtful he would contribute in year one. If you're betting on him to contribute at all, which I could hear a case for it, it's not going to be right away. The guy, struggled in the Pac-12 last year. It would be superhero stuff for him to come in and be a bench player on a team trying to win a championship. So that doesn't fully jive, but basic skill set wise, you can understand why Bronny makes some sense. We will hear more names, I'm sure. Especially now that Gambo has kind of pumped the brakes on Kolek. It felt like between Michael Scotto and Kristen Peak, there was some kind of consensus building that the Suns were just going to stay at 22 and take Kolek, and that was that. It felt a little early for something to be cemented so much, and the fact that Kolek's agent is the father of the Suns team CEO didn't fully pass the smell test, right? Which is why I'm trying to focus on the positional side of it. But let me just, because these are both guards and they're the names that we've just sort of heard most specifically tied to the Suns throughout this whole process, and I'm really talking about Kolek here more than anything. Eddie Johnson went back on local radio this week and hyped up the need for a point guard to not force Booker to be that for this team. Kind of worded it to the extent that just because Book can do it doesn't mean that you want him to do it. I get all of it. I do. I truly do. I mean, I know people here think I'm some kind of Booker truther and whatever. I'm not. It may not be the best role for him. I can admit that. Here's the deal. One, it would be a little bit foolish to me to expect that if you are taking a player at 22 that is a point guard, and Kolek makes the most sense to be that, I would think, from the guys that I've seen, unless somebody falls, the idea of that player contributing is already far from a lock. The idea of that player being the magic point guard everybody's been arguing about for 6 months to fix this team, I'm skeptical of that. I'm skeptical that anybody they could get would be that, which is why I've been against it the whole time. So while I think drafting a player at 22 gives you a really good shot to add depth and flexibility financially and all those things, that doesn't change the limitations the Suns have overall. Nothing across the 22nd pick, the Nurkic trade options, or minimum contracts in free agency feel like a surefire way to get that type of point guard who is going to be good enough to be on the court a ton and be good enough to not have Devin Booker have to do that. What I'm saying is, if you feel like you still need that, if the Suns are sitting there and they feel like they still need somebody, a 30-plus minute per game point guard, and that's part of their thinking with Kolek or Bronny or any of the other things that they're looking at, I guess to me, you're again looking in the wrong place. Because if you're that convinced that Booker and Beal and Durant kind of splitting the playmaking duties with Book being the primary initiator the majority of the time, then the real answer, if you think that setup is broken, you got to trade Bradley Beal. And I don't think you should trade Bradley Beal because I think that setup can work. But people just need to sort of pick one or the other. And when we're analyzing what the Suns should do, or if they are to take somebody like Kolek, what that means once they do it, we cannot always go back to needing this thing that they were not supposed to need. I know I'm getting a little bit off base, but I guess as it pertains to this report and this rumor, what I hope we hear are some names that maybe are not guards. Or if we do see the Suns go ahead and pick Kolek, I guess return back to the thing we were talking about last week from Gambo early in the week, which was that they want a younger point guard option who could play 20-plus minutes per game. Kolek can do that. Kolek can be that. That would help the Suns. That would provide some versatility and flexibility with lineups and with play style. That would be helpful. Nothing in this report or elsewhere has changed my mind that a point guard is gettable, the point guard is not gettable, and if you still think that's what this team needs, you're probably closer to feeling like you got to blow the whole damn thing up than you realize. And I'm not there. I don't think the Suns are there. And this rumor tells me that they want to add depth around this, not a major piece like that. Trading back is the last ingredient of what we could see the Suns do next week. Tell you what Gambo said. Tell you what the Suns can learn from the team that ousted them in 2023 about all of this, coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Summertime means baseball, basketball, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from the baseball MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. Of course, the WNBA season rolls on despite the NBA Finals being over. I am headed to Mercury Liberty right after I get finished recording, but Wednesday night, the Aces host the Storm, a potential finals preview. The Aces are 5.5-point favorites. The over-under is 169. I could see the under there. The Storm have a little bit more defensive potential than the typical team. Kelsey Plum has been a little quiet. You never know. I could see an under hitting. There are props, there are Commissioner's Cup odds, and much more across the world of the WNBA, in addition to baseball and beyond. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to check it all out and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's close out the show. So, as I mentioned, Gambo surfaced this idea that Kolek might be a little bit of a reach at 22. Now, that's, of course, Gambo's not scouting the draft, so that's kind of probably from conversations with teams. He mentioned that before we ever knew the Suns had a second workout with Bronny, Gambo had already said that he couldn't rule out them taking him, but that probably would not be at 22 either. I would even throw in the fact that we have seen them work out a guy like Jalen Tyson, who I did a breakdown of last week, I believe, on the podcast, who is not really an early 20s guy in terms of a lot of other teams' big boards. Now, that has not stopped James Jones in the past, so I'm not saying if they take Jalen Tyson, it would only be because they traded back. They could take him at 22. They could take Kolek at 22. They could take Bronny James at 22. Of course, it all takes another team to tango, right? It's going to be about if they can find that trade, not just if they want to make it. I like the philosophy, though. I like the idea of potentially getting, again, if I'm making the case the Suns should keep 22 as a way to get more bites at the apple and stay flexible, getting even more picks makes even more sense. The example that I will point to before I come back to this draft and what we could see the Suns what the Suns might be looking at is the Denver Nuggets last summer. Okay? So, it was two trades, very NFL-like, if you remember back to last summer with Denver. They traded, in total, their 2029 first and their 40th overall pick in 2023. This was all ahead of the draft, so this was the 40th pick in the draft that they were finagling in. What they got back, so 2029 first, 2023 early second. They get back the 29th pick in 2023, so they basically trade up from 40 to 29, and they get 2 additional seconds for that future 2029 first. They trade up from 40 to 29, and they get 32 and 37. And they drafted really well. Now, I think part of what you could criticize Denver for this whole season was the coaching staff not necessarily being on the same page as the front office after those moves, because Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson and the shooter from Gonzaga, whose name I can't remember right now, Julian Strother, all three of those guys were well hyped up prospects at the time Denver took them, but then Michael Malone didn't want to develop them and everything else. So that's just for context. The philosophy was very smart. The Nuggets knew we're up against some tax and cap restrictions. They knew Kentavious Caldwell-Pope would be up for a new contract potentially this summer with the player option. They have extensions for their best players. They knew Bruce Brown was probably gone. So they said, we're going to create and manufacture some depth through the draft. Splitting a future first into 2 high seconds and trading up into the first from 40, that's really smart stuff, especially those early seconds, to be honest with you, because those guys are on even less expensive contracts. So if you're worried about it from a team standpoint, that's a great way to do it. Now, the Suns, I don't think would use their 2031 pick the same way Denver used their 2029 pick, but I think the idea of getting multiple picks back for 22 makes a whole lot of sense. I have a few ideas. I look at, of course, New York is the first one you're going to have to zoom in on, right? They have 24 and 25. I kind of doubt as a 1-to-1 the Suns would be able to get both of those picks for 22. Remember, though, the Suns have 2 seconds left. We've been thinking about that, those picks that they do still have that they didn't use in the Royce O'Neal trade or they didn't lose for tampering on Drew Eubanks, as things that they could go out and attach to Royce O'Neal, to David Roddy, to Nas Little, to Yusuf Nurkic. But maybe those 2 seconds could sweeten the deal, and it's pick 22, those 2 second-round picks go to New York, and picks 24 and 25 go to Phoenix. I could see it. If the Knicks like somebody that they want to move up for. The Knicks don't have a... I don't know if that would make sense for them, but again, just spitballing. The Knicks also have the 38th pick, so maybe it's just one of those firsts and 38 that the Suns get back for 22. That's honestly what's tough is there's not a lot of other teams that have a late first and an early second. The Bucks are at 23 and 33. I could see that, but honestly, the Bucks might be the only team who need young, versatile, athletic depth pieces more than Phoenix. So I wouldn't count on Milwaukee giving up those 2 opportunities just to go out and get somebody at 22. Maybe. Not saying it won't happen. I obviously don't know. I'm just sort of speculating and piecing together some possibilities. But that's kind of where it ends as far as what we know right now. Teams that have picks in the first round after the Suns, and then a pick in the first half of the second round. It's basically New York or Milwaukee. So keep an eye there. As we saw with Denver, those trades to move around in the draft happened before the draft, days before the draft. So, early next week, don't be surprised if we hear something. Don't be surprised if there's a move and the Suns suddenly have 25 and 38. And they take Kolek with 25 and Bronny with 38 or something. Or Jalen Tyson with 38. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. I'm glad the Suns are not just beating a dead horse with these shoot-for-the-moon trades. They very well still might. Maybe this is partially to signal to other teams that they're not desperate. There might be a trade on the table for a vet that the Suns have that they can use 22 to go get. Maybe they don't like that trade, or they don't like all of it, and this is partially negotiating. Either way, it's good that they are not just full go toward the biggest, the next, the best, the greatest that they possibly can find, and they're trying to be a little bit smarter about things. That'll wrap us up for the day. Stephen Perjone will be on Thursday's show, as he always is, to break down the latest in Suns land. Might talk a little bit more about this book guard dynamic. I know we've hit it before, but it's in the news again, so Steven's insight will be appreciated there. He had some Kevin Durant ideas he was tossing my way, so I'll also have to ask him about. He came to Phoenix. He went to a Mercury game last week. I got to get his Phoenix in June scouting report, as he probably sweated his butt off, but we'll see what he says. More news, I'm sure. I'll talk to you guys then.